Hello, Divas. Today's special guest, live and in person, sitting across from me in the Terracotta Room, Rich Templin, the Director of Politics and Public Policy for the Florida AFL-CIO. We have a great chat. He's one of my OGs. We talk about politics. We talk about Vice President Kamala Harris's effect on his organizing and outreach efforts. We also talk about the Flaming Lips. Stay with us. You don't want to miss it. Rich Templin, AFL-CIO.
Think about 4 months ago, there was not the excitement for President Biden to be on the ballot. It's just that simple. I don't know that if he were on the ballot, he would have any prayer of, I think we'd be looking at a 7-point race, 8-point race. So we have really been organizing for these elections around the down-ballot races. The enthusiasm that wasn't there for President Biden is matched by the complete and utter frustration, anger, whatever words you want to use, at the Florida legislature.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
In the Terracotta Room, live and in person, IRL, with me right now, another one of my OGs. I keep saying that because it keeps being true. Rich Templin. He is the Director of Politics and Public Policy for the Florida AFL-CIO. Welcome to A Deeper Dive, Rich.
I am glad to be here. I'm a listener, and so this is very cool.
This is way cool because you also have a radio show, and I was a guest on your radio show a long time ago. You never invited me back. Should I take that personally?
I don't think it was that long ago. I think it was last year.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, it feels like a long time ago. I lost the whole year with all my injuries and everything, so I lost perspective of time. But
understandable.
I'm not shaming you. I'm just saying, I'm so excited to have you on our show after being on your show.
I'm thrilled to be here.
You've been around for a minute. How'd you get started in politics?
Well, I was at...
Look, I made him squirm. 10 seconds in, I made him squirm already.
I was at Florida State University and finishing my PhD, and my whole game plan was to, get a tenured faculty job and, do all that great stuff and research and publish. And the 2000 elections happened. And
gosh, we do go back. No, you were in graduate school. I was covering the recount for the Associated Press.
I remember. I mean, and
So when I say OG, I mean OG.
Yeah, and I was there. I had student organizations that I had founded, and we were turning students out to make their voice heard. We're watching this thing unfold. We're watching an election get actually stolen, and I started partnering with folks from the Florida AFL-CIO, and I was like, wow, they've got signs, and they know what they're doing, and they're like super organized, and after that happened, after that all went down, I really just decided fairly quickly that I didn't want to teach people how to change the world. I wanted to kind of work in it myself.
You wanted to change the world.
Yeah, and so, instead of doing it in a classroom, I, decided to do it. And the Florida AFL-CIO for about 3 months was asking me, would you come to work for us? And finally I said yes. And I've been there ever since.
Wow, that's you've been there for quite the while then. That was your first real job after college. And you still, unions like that, right? My grandfather, I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather was a house painter. He was a union guy. So I grew up in a union, and this was, so my grandfather was old enough to be my great grandfather, and I'm pretty long in the tooth. So this is a real, like, old fashioned union kind of guy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and, I have to explain to loved ones and family and friends that, why are you jumping in the car and driving down to Orlando at 9 o'clock at night? And I just remind people, I don't have a job. I have a movement, And so once you get into that mindset, you'll do pretty much anything.
Let's talk a little bit about like the purpose of unions, and politically, the unions were a very, very powerful movement, much more powerful at certain periods of time than they are right now. Certainly in Florida, we've seen their power diminish.
Mm-hmm.
The argument, I've heard some of Republican leaders say, like, we don't need the unions anymore. We've got all these laws that protect workers. Tell me why unions continue to be relevant today.
Well, it's interesting. In some ways, we do have more protections. We have the Family Medical Leave Act, but in a lot of ways, there are fewer protections in place right now for workers than there were 50 years ago. And a big reason for that is the decline of organized labor. It's funny. I was doing some research to helping another reporter work on a story, and I came upon this study. I think it was about 6 years old, and it pointed out the relationship between public policy and union density, and what it showed, there was a direct correlation, I would say causation, but between states that have higher union density have higher wages, have more access to health care. And that's not just for the union members, it's for everyone. Because the thing about unions is that their presence and their mobilization and their organizing and their work lifts all boats, not just folks in the union, but those around them. And so it was just so interesting to see this one particular graph, and it just showed union density, what average wages were, what the access to healthcare was, and it was really startling. So when Republicans say we don't need unions anymore, we need unions now more than ever. You look at income inequality. This is a pretty well shared graph, but there's a direct relationship again between union density and income inequality. Income inequality is higher now than it's ever been. And if you look back over time, when unions were at their strongest, income inequality was at its smallest.
When you're talking about income inequality, you mean between genders?
Actually, the study I read, genders, yes, absolutely. But income inequality in terms of the fact that we now have a tiny group of people
who make a whole bunch of money.
Right, who have captured...
It's the 1%.
Right.
It's the... so you're talking about sort of the shrinking of the middle class.
Correct.
Right.
But it's also true, though, when you look at states with higher union density, income inequality between men and women is lower. Income inequality between African Americans and whites, lower. Income inequality between Hispanic workers and white workers is lower. And it's because they're organizing the public policy that works for everybody, that can help us start rebuilding the middle class. And so really and truly, and it's not just my job, we need unions now more than ever. And when the legislature passed Senate Bill 256, around 200,000 union members.
Explain.
Senate Bill 256.
Our listeners, our divas are sophisticated, but I do that, and I love it when you blend into the questions, and so that's what you're doing. You're answering the question before I have a chance to ask it.
Oh, good for me.
Yes, very good for you.
Senate Bill 256 was a package of policy proposals that the legislature had been flirting with since 2011. And each one of these policy proposals that was in the package, all of this came from outside of the state. It came from right-wing think tanks. And year after year after year, it would be proposed. Representative Plankin carried it forever, and he and I have become frenemies over all those years. And we would just look at each other in a committee room sometimes. Here we go again.
Right.
But all of those proposals came from out of state think tanks that like income inequality. They like
Koch brothers.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, but the legislature never did it. And it wasn't because of Democrats. It was because of Republicans, because we had a lot of Republicans who saw value in what unions do. Politically, they understood, contrary to what everybody thinks out there, we support Republicans all the time. We are nonpartisan. We support individuals who support policies that help working people, period. It doesn't matter what, you got a D, an R, and I after your name. And so for years, the Republican legislature just wouldn't do it. It's like we don't need to go after our teachers. We don't need to go after law enforcement and firefighters. Like, it's just not worth it. Like, there's no problem in Florida, so please take that home. Flash forward, and Governor DeSantis takes power and took the legislature with it. And most of his policy proposals over the last 3 years have been in a couple different silos. Number one, red meat for the Republican base. And that's all the culture wars that we saw that so many people knew were useless, that so many people knew that, and they didn't even want to do it, but they had to. But another silo was pleasing the donor class for his presidential run. And so we got sucked up in that because the Koch brothers network wanted this bill, and they, were paying highly for it. And so it finally passed. Again, they tried year after year after year. It finally went through. So what that bill
the moderates were able to create a coalition with the Democrats to block it for many years.
Absolutely. And I think,
moderate Republicans.
I think of, the Alex Villaloboses and the real Republicans that we used to have. And then they're still there. They are. And
Charlie Dean.
I think Charlie Dean. I think very highly of some of the folks in the Republican caucus. And I know it's been difficult for them with the way the governor has, handled the legislature. But what the policy package does, some of the key elements. First thing, no more automatic deduction to pay your union dues. For 50 years, people in Florida, workers in Florida in the public sector, could have their dues deducted from their paycheck. They had to sign up for it. They had to approve it. They see it every week or every month on their paycheck. Well, they took that away. Now, there are hundreds of acceptable paycheck deductions in the state of Florida. Hundreds. Whether it's United Way, if you work at Florida State, you can get paycheck deductions for your football tickets, right? I mean, we have approved hundreds of these.
Right.
But the legislature just went after this one. The second thing they did is they were convinced that they wouldn't have a legal problem. And so far they haven't, but we don't know yet. They excluded police officers and firefighters and correctional officers.
Yeah.
Pure politics.
They loved up on the law enforcement. That's what I call it, loving up on law enforcement.
Right. And they acknowledged it.
Is that bad? I don't think that's not a bad way of putting it.
And so...
so they excluded them and they got more support from people who might otherwise say, hey, this is not a good idea.
And the other thing that the bill does, or did, the law is doing now, is the union has to show that 60% of the whole bargaining unit, right? So let's say the Department of Education. 60% has to be a dues-paying union member for the union to exist.
Yeah, that's a high bar.
Now, in what world does that make sense to anybody? Because here's the interesting thing. All workers can vote on a contract, not just union members. When the union negotiates a contract and goes back to workers, all workers get to vote on it. You don't have to be a union member. And when you look at the percentage of workers who vote on those contracts, it's north of 90%.
Oh, wow.
Every time. So 90% of workers support the union contract, but because Florida's a right-to-work state and you don't have to join the union, they get it for free. They get the benefit.
Right. They enjoy the benefit without having to pay for them.
I mean, that's the American way, right? If you can get something for free, you're going to do it. And so if you take the combination of those elements, the no paycheck deduction, and the fact that 60% have to be paying dues, that has really, really decimated some of our public sector unions. And so, right now, we are rebuilding, and it's happening. Matter of fact, it was happening so well that the Freedom Foundation, the out-of-state group that is largely responsible for the bill, went back to the legislature and went to the Public Employee Relations Commission and said, this isn't hard enough. Like, they're winning. The unions are coming back. We can't have that. They changed the law again. They changed the policies again to make it almost impossible to follow the process for these workers to keep their union and to keep their negotiations or their negotiating power. And so understand this, like, there are now workers, there are teachers, there are folks who have no voice for them. Nobody's looking out for them. Nobody's sticking up for them. When they go to talk about their salaries, they're by themselves. And what does that lead to? This employee, is a brown noser, and gets a huge raise, and this employee over here who does the exact same job doesn't. And there's nobody there to keep that from happening. So
inequities
all over the place, and we're seeing it. But again, all of the polling has shown public support for unions is higher now than it's been in decades. Workers around the country are organizing. Unions are growing. Union membership is growing. Union density is increasing. There's no way that anybody can argue otherwise. But here in Florida, in the public sector, because the public and private sector are governed by two different things, folks in the public sector are having a really difficult time because the state has made it almost impossible for them to do that.
So what are you doing? You said you're building back up, or did that... Hang on one second. I adjusted this. Is it too loud for you? Do you want me to turn it down?
No.
Okay. Let's take that part out, Mike, please. So what are you doing to adjust to, I know there's litigation, there really, I think a recent ruling, the judge really kind of upheld most of, I think it was SB 256.
Yeah, there's a lot of different pieces on it.
Yeah.
There's litigation that's pending. There's litigation that is being contemplated.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not going to, talk in any detail on that.
No.
But our affiliates, so Florida AFL-CIO, we're the umbrella organization. So we don't necessarily do the boots on the ground organizing. That's our affiliates, individual unions. Your Teamsters, AFSCME, the different affiliates. They have been amazingly resilient in many ways in terms of rolling, taking the punches. They change the rules, they adapt. They change the rules again, they adapt. And so they are now in the workplaces, organizing members, communicating with them, setting up alternative ways for them to pay their dues, so that it's kind of an automatic thing, just not through the paycheck. They're making sure that everybody understands that with no union, you have no contract. There has to be somebody on both sides of a contract. And so if these unions get decertified, the contract is meaningless. And so they really are doing fantastic work organizing and so that people can keep their union, keep their contract, keep their pay, keep their benefits, and keep their jobs.
Are there union, I'm going to use the wrong word, but like, I know there's like locals, right? Being decertified now?
Yes.
Do you have numbers on how many?
Not off the top of my head. Some of your colleagues, McKenna Schuler with Orlando Weekly.
Right.
Several of your colleagues have been following this very closely.
Right.
But anybody can go to the PERC website, Public Employee Relations Commission, and they have a list of the unions that they're decertifying. And it's interesting. I
think I heard the governor, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because he uses this term a lot, but I feel like I heard him say like they took credit for kneecapping the unions. Did he ever say that? Or am I imagining that?
He has said things to that nature on the campaign trail for sure.
Yeah.
And again, I find it so interesting. I don't think he understands the electorate. When you're in Pennsylvania and you're in Michigan and you're in Wisconsin, and you talk like that, you're not winning anything because they're Republicans and they're union members.
That's right.
We have articulated more times than I can count. We are not this like group of Democrats. As a matter of fact, just over a third of our membership is Democrat.
Really?
Right,
Just a third?
right at a third, a little more. I'm like 35, 36%. And another third is Republican.
So a third.
And another third is NPA. And they just don't understand.
So there's this
that.
mythology about like these are lefty liberals out to...
The policies can be seen as lefty and liberal.
Right.
The people are not.
I got you.
Making sure that women are paid the same as men, considered liberal. Unless you're a woman, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agree that that's a liberal policy. That doesn't feel like a liberal policy to me.
Oh, I don't think so either. But that's the type of policy that
gets you
labeled,
branded as a liberal.
That gets you labeled that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about politics. Early voting has, we've already been talking about politics, but early voting has already started. We're recording this now just a little bit under a week before Florida's primary election.
Yeah, big early voting site, just 3 blocks west of us. Yeah,
that's where I usually early vote. But,
me too.
What impact has Vice President Kamala Harris's late entry into the presidential race? He can't wait to answer this question. Had on the down ballot races you're involved in?
It organizationally, it's been a bit of a nightmare for me. If you think about 4 months ago, there was not the excitement for President Biden to be on the ballot. It's just that simple. I don't know that if he were on the ballot, he would have any prayer of, I think we'd be looking at a 7-point race, 8-point race. So our focus...
Nationally?
No, here.
In Florida, okay.
And I just made those numbers up.
Right. He would get pretty much creamed by Florida standards.
I think so.
Yeah, I agree.
And so our focus...
No chance in hell, I think, is how I described it when people asked.
Right. So we have really been organizing for these elections around the down ballot races. The enthusiasm that wasn't there for President Biden is matched by the complete and utter frustration, anger, whatever words you want to use, at the Florida legislature.
Okay.
And so a lot of organizations were really, focusing on these legislative races because that's what I had said earlier that I forgot to bring some numbers. I'm going to try to get as close as I can. But I have found a couple of stories that I think are underpaid attention to. One was in NBC News, and it was back in March. And NBC News, and I think the headline was like, they came for the sun and they left for whatever reason. But as everybody knows, we had a big population boom during COVID.
Right.
And the governor was all over the place saying, "Come to Florida, no taxes, no masks,
Right.
no vaccines,
Right. No jabs.
Right." So
I hate when they call it a jab.
So I do too.
Yeah.
But it's around 700,000 people relocated to Florida during that time, and a little before and a little after. However, by 2022, 500,000 of those people left.
Who can afford to live here anymore?
Right. And so the reporting went farther. It wasn't just, oh, look at these numbers. And
Right.
all those numbers are based on the U.S. Census, the Bureau. And they went a little farther and talked to these folks. And there was 3 reasons that everybody gave. I moved to Florida, but I went back home, or I went somewhere else.
Right.
Number 1, high costs.
It's expensive.
Number 2, insurance. Insurance. Now,
Is related
Right.
directly
Correct.
to high costs. Go ahead.
number 3, what was the word they used? Hateful politics.
Yeah. My next door neighbors just moved for that reason. I'll tell you about it in a minute.
But so we've got this state, and all these people moved to Florida. Now they're leaving, and the reasons they are leaving are directly connected to what the legislature has been doing for the past 2-3 years. They can say all day long they're addressing the insurance crisis. They're not. What they did to fix the crisis was give the insurance lobby every single thing that they've been asking for the 20 years that I've been here doing it. There was stuff that passed that the insurance lobby has been wanting since the aughts.
Particularly the lawyers' fees.
Absolutely. And so
John Morgan was just talking about that on my show a couple weeks ago.
So their way to fix the insurance crisis was to basically strip all the rights of the consumer, give everything to the insurance companies without even require that they lower rates. There was an amendment on that bill 6 or 7 times it came up saying, if we're going to give you this $3 billion, if we're going to do this, we're going to do that, you have to adjust rates by this much or that much. They wouldn't take the amendment.
The argument now is that, we've been underpaying for property insurance for many, many years, and now we have to, we have to pay the piper.
Right. Well, it's asinine, and it doesn't matter. It's still, people are suffering. So the one thing they could have fixed, they did, or they didn't. And then, who wants to move to a state and all that you see on the news is people hating on trans kids or banning books that's not what people came to Florida for.
But a lot of people are still moving here for that. People who love, I have cousins in Philadelphia area, New Jersey area, in Pennsylvania who are moving to, love Governor DeSantis and want to move to Florida because they like his policies.
But if we look at the numbers, just the numbers. Now, again, we don't know why a lot of this is anecdote.
Right.
But when we look at the numbers, it's not playing out that way. We are, for every person that moves to Florida right now, according to what I read, 2 are leaving. And it's because nobody is doing anything for the average people. They have spent 2 years trying to ban books. They've spent 2 years beating up on trans kids. They've spent all of this time.
Well, wait till all the people in the condos get bought out by the developers.
Absolutely. That's next.
Yeah,
that's
happening.
next.
It's happening. That is going to be the story, the Florida story, unless we have some major storms. But I think that condo story is going to be the major story next year.
And again, there are I don't like casting anything in a partisan lens, because I know for a fact there are Republican lawmakers that wanted to do more on insurance. I know for a fact there are Republican lawmakers that didn't want to go after these kids, that didn't want to ban books. I mean, I know that for a fact.
That's true.
But they
didn't also want the 6-week abortion ban.
Absolutely. But the governor had just had a blowout election where he won by historic margins.
Yep.
And
percentage points.
I'm quite convinced some lawmakers, I'm not going to say anybody by name, really thought they'd be going to the White House with Ron DeSantis.
Yes.
He then flames out, and, now they're holding the bag on all these problems. And so our thinking for this election cycle was, let's marshal that energy. Let's marshal that energy and find the candidates who are going to support the policies that are going to actually start helping families in the state, and run on that.
We will be right back with Rich Templin.
This year, marijuana is on the ballot.
In Florida, marijuana is already available
on the streets.
You have no idea what's in it.
Amendment 3 fixes that. Amendment 3 gives adults access to legal, safe marijuana.
And the freedom to make their own choices.
While generating billions for better schools and safer communities.
Vote yes on Amendment 3. Paid political advertisement paid for by Smart and Safe Florida, 1400 Village Square Boulevard, Suite 3, 321, Tallahassee, Florida, 32312.
And we're back in the Terracotta Room with Rich Templin, the Director of Politics and Public Policy for the Florida AFL-CIO. Your voice when you were talking about President Biden, just the tone of your voice, and you'll hear it when you hear the podcast when it comes out. Because I can see your facial expressions and the folks at home can't. But the tone in your voice when you're talking about President Biden and everybody was, okay, he's going to lose in Florida, but, surely there was not a consensus that he was going to lose or would lose the general nationally.
I think so, yeah.
Right? But just your voice as you're describing President Biden and Kamala Harris illustrates the enthusiasm gap or the enthusiasm lift, I guess. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
And I will say this, and
just your whole body language.
Anybody who knows anything about politics, the few weeks after his debate performance, if they wanted to see the president reelected, that was a terrible, terrible time. It was painful to watch because I think the outcome, it's working out. But that was just brutal to watch.
Yeah.
It was brutal to watch the fact that, if the Democrats hadn't set up that circular firing squad, that story wouldn't have been dominant every single media day for week after week after week. I'll give the president some credit when he did the interview with Lester Holt.
Yeah.
He asked a good question. He said, I had a bad night. Why is all the reporting on my bad night not the fact that my opponent lied 34 times,
he did
verifiably? And it was because of the Democrats. Like, it was because of all the backbiting and the hand wringing.
Yeah,
and
there was a lot going on. Circular firing squad is a good way of putting it. I've had neighbors and friends ask me, so was this all part of a big cunning plan on the, of Biden and the Democrats, that he would, he would go and fumble and then step out, so that this was all orchestrated? And I keep saying no, because I had spoken to people on the Biden, working on the Biden campaign, and I don't think that was all. This was not plan. And he is a stubborn old Irish guy who was not going to get, didn't do this because he wanted to, and certainly didn't seem to be planned. But am I wrong?
No. And it's funny, a mutual friend just popped into my mind because I'm sure he would have a better quip than I do, Steve Shale.
Yeah.
But if anybody thinks that Democratic politics are that organized and that smart and cunning, I mean,
Right.
You don't know much.
Right.
No, of course not. And it was a really difficult time. It was a difficult process, and the process played out. The president did a very selfless thing. I think that will be, something that history thinks about for a long time.
Hopefully remembered maybe more for that than for that debate performance.
Oh, right. I mean, the good you do always outlasts the mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And so, but now that there's all this energy around the top of the ticket, it's a different playing field.
So it's real. I was asking a friend of mine who works for the Biden campaign, about a week into this, I'm seeing, the memes are starting, and people are, you're watching TV, you're reading the news, you're looking at social media. There was a lot, enthusiasm we keep using the word enthusiasm, excitement. Enthusiasm, I think, is too tame. There was this just burst of excitement, and I'm calling them and saying, is this real? Because I'm feeling it, I'm feeling it just from what I'm looking at, not for me personally. I'm just is my sense of what's happening, is this real? It was real?
Well, the way that we do politics, so we work with our what's called protected class, and that's our union members, their families, and union retirees. That's who we focus on.
Okay.
There are 1.3 million members of the protected class in the state of Florida.
Okay, that's certainly enough to win an election.
So, well, I mean, voter turnout is not that. But to their credit, union members turn out to vote 12 to 14 points higher than the general public.
Okay.
So,
but I interrupted you.
No, that's so what we do is we mobilize our members to communicate with each other at the doors, on the phones, in the workplace. To mobilize people around those candidates we've endorsed. And this year we've endorsed plenty of Republicans in the legislature, folks that are reasonable, doing a good job, at least hear us out. We've endorsed Democrats. Our national AFL-CIO has endorsed Joe Biden, and then had quickly endorsed the new Harris ticket. And so our job is to, mobilize our members to communicate with each other, contact each other. And in the last 3 weeks, the level of interest and, people actually calling, I want to volunteer, has increased exponentially.
Right.
So it is it's a real thing. I didn't have the opportunity to go. I was going to just to check it out. But they had an event for volunteers for the Harris campaign the other night at the Moon, and from what I understand, it was packed.
The Moon's a large venue here in Tallahassee.
Yeah, and I don't remember the Biden campaign ever, or the Obama campaign ever pulling that off. I mean, it's a real thing out there.
And it's important in Florida, maybe even if the vice president doesn't take Florida, maybe to close the gap, narrow the margins politically, even though you're nonpartisan, but speaking in general terms, for donors to be interested in Florida, you can't be losing elections by 20 percentage points, if you want that national funding. Right.
Look, political donors are copycats. So in 2020, Florida was seen as more of a red state. Okay, there's data, there's numbers, I get it. Okay. And then in 2022, the disaster for the Democratic side of politics happened. And once donors start saying, oh, yeah, no, we're not going to help in Florida. We're not going to help in Florida. Well, they look at each other and, oh, well, he's not helping in Florida. She's not helping in Florida. I'm not either, right? You know? Mm-hmm. And so it is so important to remind folks around the country that, yes, Democrats, the Democratic side of politics is on been on hard knocks. But it's important to point out the data. And the data is that Florida is still a purple state. When we look
okay, go ahead. Tell me why, because I've been saying Florida is deep red for a couple of years now, but go ahead and persuade me.
So we know now what's the Republican voter registration advantage.
I see you doing it again. I love it.
It's like a million. Huge. That's a huge difference. But you know what? We don't know if those voters are going to vote.
Well, actually, I saw a story, or the Democrats sent out, I'm sure you saw it, a memo saying that the difference isn't really a million because that doesn't include the inactive voters. That when you include the inactive voters, I think and I could be wrong, but I believe it's like around 500,000, which is still a large gap compared to what the Democrats always had the edge in Florida, right?
And it is. It is a large gap.
Yeah.
But again, we're not. Nobody can say for certain what all these new voter registrations, how they're going to vote, if they're going to vote. Like we don't know. That's just registration. When you look at 2022. And, I'm not a genius on this at all, but in 2022, it was a very low turnout election.
Right.
The problem was that Democratic participation, Republican participation was down 2%, I believe, statewide. Democratic, 10% statewide. 24% in places like Central Florida. I think it was 18% in Miami-Dade, right?
Really big in Miami-Dade, Palm Beach too.
Yeah, those voters are still here. They just didn't vote. They didn't feel inspired to vote. Now, I don't have any data to support this. Part of my thinking, politics is like, it's 60% data, 40% magic, right? It's like, it's not all science. But my thinking is that it was a really, really rough time for people who are more Democratic leaning in the state. I think people felt helpless. They felt hopeless. And they did not participate. They did not come out and vote. But they are still here. They are still in Florida. They voted before. They can vote again. So when you start thinking of it that way, there's no reason to write Florida off as a deep red state. And again, I'd be fine if we were a deep red state. But if we had Republican leadership that was actually taking care of the needs of the people who live in the state. And again, there are great Republicans on the ballot this year, and we're supporting a lot of them. But I also, and I've communicated this with some of our leadership around Florida, that our Republicans leaders, like folks that are union presidents, but they're Republican. Mm-hmm. And I've communicated to them. I said, look, this whole supermajority thing doesn't work for anybody. It's not good for Republicans. It's not good for Democrats. It's not good for anybody. We need to have more of a balance in the legislature. Yeah. And, one of our goals as a movement, Florida's labor movement, is to try to bring back some of that balance, is to try to make things a little more balanced. So you have to work together, so Republicans will actually ask the Democrats their opinion or have to negotiate with them, because that helps everybody. It makes the system better. It makes the process better. You've seen it. You've seen it when it happens, and you've seen it when it doesn't. When it happens, we get better policy.
Mm-hmm. So what are the races, some of the races that you think are going to be the hot races in November?
I think folks should really keep an eye on Central Florida. I think there's a handful of races there that the Democrats lost in 2022 when they shouldn't have. I would watch that. There's a couple of legislative races in Miami-Dade that I think people should watch. right here in Leon County. Well, right here in the Big Bend. People should watch the race for the Senate, Senate District 3. I mean, that's
Daryl Parks is challenging incumbent Senator Corey Simon, who flipped that seat. So I think that Ben Albritton sat right where you're sitting
and
now,
talked about how he was not going to lose
all in. As much as it takes to win, he said. Yeah,
I heard that.
Yeah.
I listened. No, and Senator Albritton, soon to be Senate President Albritton, is he's a smart guy, and he can do this job. He's a very formidable opponent to anybody trying to. But Daryl Parks is, Corey Simon is a much beloved former FSU football player, pro football player. But Daryl Parks is really kind of a legendary civil rights leader, as part of Parks and Crump.
Sure.
He is very well known in this community.
Yeah, very well known.
Has connections to folks that he can raise a lot of money for his campaign. So that's going to be really, really interesting to watch.
I'm going to get them both on the show. I'm going to get them both on Deeper Dive because I'm very interested in that race.
Yeah.
It's very intriguing.
And again, if we go back and look at 2022, and you look at Leon and Gadsden County, they underperformed. It's just that simple. You have more people coming out to vote in Leon and Gadsden. Former Senator Loran Osley would still be there.
Right.
So it really, really is so much about turnout. And I hate, I hear the pundits on TV, it's about turnouts, but that's the oldest thing in the book. But in this case, in Florida, it really, really is. I don't think people should write off Florida. There are plenty of votes here to get. We have to inspire. We have to mobilize. We've got to give them a reason to vote. And I really believe with everything we've seen in the legislature and all the controversy and all the kind of hate, and I really think people are ready for change.
What are people telling you? Your members, or what did you call them? Your something like
our affiliates?
No, not your affiliates.
Those are the organizations.
You used a name for there's the active members, retired members, your
households.
So you had not targets, your whatever. I can't remember.
Protected class.
That's it.
All right.
Your protected class.
Right.
What are your protected class telling you issues that really matter to them? I'm wondering, let me let you answer that question, and then I want to ask you about workforce housing, affordable housing, housing in general.
That's funny. So you stole mine this time.
I stole your answer.
No. Housing is a huge issue.
Yeah.
I mean, we have union members, for example, in Central Florida, that make good salaries, good wages, and work hard, that can't find housing. That may have to live in a car for a little while, and that is a huge issue. A lot of our members are either employed by a school district or they're teachers, but they have kids in school. We hear a lot about that too, like what has happened in our schools, how this governor has turned public education into a minefield, into a battlefield. They're tired of it. They're tired of, think of Broward County. Broward County is the bluest county in
the People's Republic of Broward.
Right. And yet
my hometown.
Their school board is now dominated by Ron DeSantis appointees.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is literally going around the state kicking elected officials out of office and replacing them with his own. People don't like that. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or what. I mean, people just don't like it. It's not right. So housing for sure. Our public schools is a big one. The heat stress thing just
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, especially I'm getting it's too hot for me to walk my dog,
Yeah.
It's really, we're getting these heat advisories on our phones every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
And, now local governments, and many local governments were poised to do this, enact some regulations so that people aren't dropping dead while they're just trying to, bring a paycheck home to their families. That has really energized a lot of people because now, and again,
because the legislature preempted that. No,
correct, and won't enact any of their own.
Right.
There was legislation filed last year, the year before that, that sets up basic standards to protect people from heat stress, provides training, provides incentive for training, so that supervisors can recognize when someone might be a victim of a heat-related illness. They won't even allow us to do that.
Yeah.
That bill has had one hearing, I think, in 4 years, and it passed the committee, it passed the Senate Agriculture Committee unanimously. But somebody's blocking it. Somebody doesn't want it to happen.
So who is it? Is it sugar? Is it
contractors?
Builders. Okay.
Yeah. Who also pushed legislation to have 16-year-olds up on a roof in this heat while not protecting them.
Right. That's right. You can. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So
I totally forgot about that bill.
Children can now work on a construction site. No heat stress protections or anything else.
And they can work more hours. Yeah.
Now, I will say the child labor bill, very motivating to people. That also was just too far. And that's the thing. I think the lesson from 2024 will be, this is purely, I'm guessing, you can go too far. And I think over the last couple of years, the legislature has gone too far.
I see you up there for a year. I was doing it from home because of my fall and break and whatever. But, you go up to the podium. You're not one of these who's like the lobbyist who is just schmoozing at the governor's club or walking the halls. You do walk the halls, but you go up and you testify yourself at the podium time after time, bill after bill, running from one committee to another. A lot of bills you just talked about. There were many more that you spoke about just over the past year, 2 years, a lot of this legislation, right, since 2022. Do you ever get
Absolutely.
I can't.
Absolutely. And again, for the last couple years, especially, since that COVID session when we had to be at the Civic Center, that was the most weird, bizarre thing ever. The craziest thing about that whole experience of having to testify in front of Senate committees at the Civic Center? They had a camera so that the committee could see you.
Yeah.
And then they had a big screen in front of you. But they didn't show you the senators.
Yeah.
They showed you yourself.
Yeah, you couldn't see. I didn't go over there because I have type 1 diabetes, and I was convinced that I needed to stay at home, and so it was a really hard period for me.
I didn't want to go over there.
Isolated. No, I was very isolated, and people were telling me, you need to go over there. You need to see this. It's really weird. And it is just what you said. You couldn't see them, so you couldn't read their body language. You didn't know how they were responding to what you were saying.
All you can see is a giant image of yourself.
Yeah.
Talk about weird.
Yeah.
And I love the sergeants in both chambers, and I've gotten to know them over the years, and they are just fantastic people. But I would beg them. I'm like, is there any way? Can you just turn the camera off? I don't want to look at myself.
Right.
Please. No, this is how we're supposed to do it. And they're doing their job.
Follow the rules.
But no, it has been a very, very difficult time. What I value and what keeps me going are those conversations behind the scenes with Republicans who will say, well, I can't vote with you, but I can help this way. I can do this to try to make this better.
Make it better.
And I don't think people realize how often that happens, right? It's not just a up or down.
Yeah.
And I'm going to gush a little bit on, just as an example, Senator Burgess.
Danny Burgess?
Yep, had the child labor bill.
He's the guy with $1 million smile.
Oh, he is the nicest human being on the planet.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how.
They give him all the crap.
Oh, no,
bills
because it's
because he's the nicest. Like, and he's so sincere when he's talking, and yeah.
Well,
so
you said that, I didn't, but
I mean, he comes across. No, you know what I'm saying is like he comes across as really sincere and earnest. He's very earnest,
and he gets the bills that people would get the most upset.
Oh yeah,
over.
they give him the crap bills. Yeah, yeah.
But he said early on in the process around the child labor bill, he's got a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And they will be homeschooled. And
right.
He said, I really was interested in this legislation because, I think that homeschooled families, homeschooled kids, I think there should be some flexibility that's not in the law right now. Now, when that bill started, it eliminated any kind of caps for kids to work. It basically gave employers the ability to really abuse kids. It really, really did. Mm-hmm. And true to his word, before that bill passed the process, it was whittled down to exactly what he said he was interested in. And that's when you have hope. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. It was such a, oh my gosh. And I was up in committee and, everybody's like, wait, you're for the bill? Because I said, we're for the bill. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's almost like he should have bought me dinner afterwards because I was just loving all over him because it was such a great moment.
Yes, you heard it here, guys. Rich Templin's bromance with Senator Danny Burgess. Yeah, you do. There's a part, though, sometimes where you kind of, do you ever really just want them to say, like, privately they're telling you, this controversial. I shouldn't have said crap bill. They gave him the controversial bills is what they've done in the past. I really don't like this bill, but I have to, I can tell you how many Republicans told me privately about the 6-week abortion ban. They did not want to have to go on the board for that. They resented that leadership forced them to go on the board for that. Some of them were given a pass if they were in swing districts. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But is there a part of you that just wants people to say, okay, this is how you want to vote, then vote it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's,
you don't get a pass for saying, I really didn't want to, I had to hold my nose.
Right. It was, one of the things that I learned in this process from watching the leaders of the chambers is that part of their job is to protect their members. Part of their job is to make sure that their members don't go home having done something that their constituents will be upset about. That I always saw that the really successful ones, to me, that seemed to be part of their job. Mm-hmm. Like they were always thinking about it. I can't have my members voting on this. Right. They can't go home. I think we saw an abandonment of that the last few years. And again, I think partly it's the supermajorities. Partly it was this kind of fever around the governor and his presidential ambitions. I am so hopeful in the incoming Speaker of the House and the incoming Senate President that we're going to get back to what you and I grew up with, like back to
a separate branch of government.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's good. And I think that I think we need to restore some balance. I don't think supermajorities are good for anybody. And that's what we're aiming for.
I mean, a lot of people are really hopeful for that. So we'll come back in a year and we'll see how successful they were. With the governor has 3 more years, in office, and is not running for president at this moment, but he still, he is running for president, isn't he? Still, really?
I mean, it seems like it.
28?
Yeah.
Do we not believe that? So are we going to see that continue to play out? Maybe their allegiance to him might not be quite as, ingrained as it was over the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't speak to that. I know for a fact that there's a lot of good people in the legislature. Like, I am not one of those who just hates one side or the other, is mad at one side or the other. Like, I believe there's a lot of great people.
I'm not hating on anybody.
Oh, no, I know. But in my circle, there's a lot of people who don't see a benefit to one side or the other.
Yeah.
That's not me. And
you won't get anything done if.
Well, no, but how could you do this job that way? Like, you'd just be miserable all the time.
Well, that's true. You would be.
If you can't find the people that you genuinely like and feel privileged to be able to meet with and talk to, I mean, I don't buddy around with those guys. Like, I'm not one of those dudes, but man, I have great conversations with them. And, I mean, there's been there's people that were termed out, Republican chairs, that made my life a living hell that I'm going to miss next year.
Who?
They know who they are.
Okay. Fair enough.
Because, if you say one and you don't say somebody else, you're in trouble. But no, that is the thing that, because back to where you started, like, how do you do this? That's how, is you just, I like people. Well,
also, if you're part of a movement, if your work is working on a movement, then that's a driving force for you, right? Because you actually believe in the purpose for.
Right. And again, I think on insurance, we'll get there. We have to. The status quo will not, it can't last much longer. I mean, let's see what happens with this hurricane season, right?
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. I hope it's not.
Because one of the things that I'm so concerned about is I don't think the average homeowner knows that they basically have lost all their rights. If their house blows down and the insurance company doesn't want to do right by them, and they go to an attorney, they're going to find out. I can't do that. We can't sue for that. We can't do that anymore.
Well, they can, only they won't have enough money to fix their house.
Right. So I'm really worried about that. Yeah. And if that happens, they have to change. They have to. I think they're going to fix the heat stress thing. I think things are going to quiet down, and you're going to need some people in the room to help unwrap some of the terrible policies that have happened with our schools. And that's what our members want. They want change. They
had to back a little bit on the school the book challenges, right? Mm-hmm. Because it was getting so crazy. So they had to put some guardrails around that.
Well, right. And it's just, I mean, come on. We're taking $4 billion out of public education in the form of vouchers. People are using vouchers to buy vacations and indoor, in-home gym equipment. I mean,
we'll be seeing, I'm sure there'll be a lot of reporting on how those dollars are being used in the coming.
Right. And the bottom line is people like their public schools. That is the school of choice for most people. And so 80% to 90% of kids are still in the traditional public school system. You can't starve it of resources like they're doing and continue to get away with it. Like parents, they're just not going to put up with it.
When I called you and asked you if you wanted to be on the show, you asked me if I wanted to talk about Labor Day. So we're approaching Labor Day. This is going to be coming out probably, I think, a week or so, maybe 2 weeks before Labor Day. But is that something that you wanted to talk about?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
That's just what a lot of people have been calling about. But I will say one thing about this Labor Day. I'm really excited because at our we have 10 central labor councils around the state. And our central labor councils are usually the one that throw the big Labor Day picnic and party and all that.
Right.
And most of them, their Labor Day picnic, music, whatever, is now turned into political action. They are going to be knocking on doors. They are going, like they are
not
starting
be sitting around, singing.
Right. They are starting right away with this campaign. And again, they want their schools fixed. They want to be able to live here. Mm-hmm. They want to be able to afford a home, and those are things that the legislature's not been doing for them, and they want change. And so I think you watch Central Florida, watch South Florida, Miami-Dade, and I think those are going to be really interesting races to watch. And hopefully, if we get a little bit more balance, we can get away from the kind of culture wars and everything that we've been in for the last 2 years and start really tackling some of these problems. Because the labor community will be there. We will do, whatever we can do to help improve our state. That's who our people are. That's who our members are. They're all very active in the community. I mean, if you find someone who's in a union, you find that they are more likely than not active in the community and trying to fix things.
Have you all taken a position on Amendments 3 and 4, the adult use, recreational marijuana, and the right to an abortion?
No. And part of that, it was very controversial. We do everything in a super democratic way. I mean, small d. Because in order for us to take a position, 2/3 of our delegates at our political convention have to approve of any position. And so it was very passionate. I don't believe that and so we had about 300 people in the room. I don't think anybody was necessarily against either amendment. There's a lot of concern out there right now as these unions are building back,
right,
to try to steer clear of those issues that can be divisive just for
you don't want to piss anybody off.
Yeah. I mean, I piss people off
smart.
all the time.
No,
so it's
but
not
I think but I think that's the strategy, right? I mean,
but reproductive rights and is one of those things that our unions fight for in their contracts. They fight for it at the negotiating table when it comes to health insurance. It's not something that the labor community, is like, oh no, we're this or we're that. I think it was just, hey, we're trying to build back. We're trying to grow. Let's focus on the policies that everybody agrees on. And so we did not take a position.
Makes
we did
sense.
take a position against Amendment 2 on the school boards.
Oh, no, I think 2 is the hunting and fishing.
Oh, okay. Well, the school board amendment, the term limits,
right.
They put that on the ballot before. Well,
Yes.
It was the voters who said we don't want partisan school boards.
Right.
The legislature put that on the ballot.
That's
the
right.
voters said we don't want partisan school boards.
Right.
So now they're doing it again. This last iteration, we fought to keep off the ballot for, 6 years. It's been filed over and over again. It finally made it. We think that's a big deal. We want to depoliticize our school systems.
Right.
We want to get the politics out. There's too much. And so we're going to be communicating with our members and encouraging them to vote against having partisan school boards. I don't think the voters are going to prove it again. I don't think anybody thinks we need more partisan politics
partisan,
in our lives.
not term limits. Is it partisan or term limit?
Partisan.
Yeah.
Partisan.
Yeah,
Term limits were, I'm sorry if I misspoke, because those have been 2 bills for a long time.
Yes.
Term limits, they just decided to bypass the Constitution, and
they passed it.
They passed it in statute.
Yeah.
I still don't know why nobody has filed
Nobody's
suit.
challenged it.
I
know.
don't understand it.
Same.
But no, I'm referring to the
that's what I
partisan
thought.
elections.
So you do a radio show. Let me ask you, you're into music. I could hear when your phone was going off, you had some song playing. What's on your favorite playlist?
Oh my gosh, you got to give me like a genre. I have a playlist for every possible genre.
What's your favorite genre?
I've been in college radio for like 30 years, so I'm by definition a music snob.
Yeah.
So like you got to give me a little bit more parameters here.
What playlist for? Well, you drove up here on 2 wheels. I can't say your driving playlist. What's on your
this time of year?
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of kind of classic metal.
Classic metal.
You know, like your Iron Maiden.
Okay.
You know, your
that is like I have an eclectic, very eclectic, probably like you. Metal is like the one genre that I really don't like. I really hardly have any of. I've got twang, I've got all this and all that. Iron Maiden is like one thing that I would not listen to.
I've been doing a lot of rockabilly.
I love rockabilly. BR549 I really like. I saw them at the old Cow House.
Oh my gosh, Flaming Lips was here in Tallahassee. That was an amazing show. I was really impressed.
I was
impressed with the amphitheater.
Yeah.
I hadn't been to a show there.
I saw Wilco there.
I did see Wilco there. I forgot.
Okay, then you're lying.
But I was really impressed with the Flaming Lips, and ever since that show, I've been going back and listening to the Flaming Lips more often. I like
the Flaming Lips. They remind me of the Violent Femmes because they came around at the same time, I think. And I saw the Violent Femmes with Joan Armatrading.
Oh, wow. Joan Armatrading.
Ago. Yeah.
I'll be listening to that at some point tonight.
I love Joan Armatrading.
Yeah, no,
I'm so glad that she's having a renaissance.
Yeah, I hadn't
with
even
that country
thought of that.
Star. I can't think of his name, but the country. That was so beautiful, that duet they did, right? I also saw Joan Armatrading with Elvis Costello.
Wow.
Yeah, that was good.
Never seen Elvis Costello.
She opened. Really?
I hate it every time. Elvis Costello, The Modern Lovers. Some of those first records they did, just gold. I'd love to see it live, and I never did.
Okay, another one I saw here in Tallahassee.
Oh no, not The Modern Lovers.
No.
Oh my gosh, I was getting.
Jonathan Richman.
Jonathan Richman, right?
Yes, I saw Jonathan Richman at Club Down Under.
I did too.
Okay. We've been at a lot of the same concerts.
I miss the Club Down Under so much.
No, it was Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
And the Attractions, yes.
Yeah. Okay, one last music question. Pick a song that best represents Florida politics.
Oh my God. I don't know. Something from like Massive Attack, maybe? I don't know.
Massive Attack. 9 Inch Nails.
But no, I don't have an answer.
You don't have one for that, huh?
I mean, it wouldn't be.
How
any
about
of the...
Creep?
Right.
Okay. Just kidding. Although I love that song. I do love Radiohead.
Right.
That's one concert that I missed. I had tickets to, and I didn't get to go. So something happened. Something political probably happened. Any parting thoughts for us? Rich Templin,
Oh, I don't even know what the title is anymore. It's just it's changed. It's changed a bunch. Director of Politics and Public Policy. It sounds when really it's just like I just have to get shit done. That should be my title.
Rich Templin, who gets shit done. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much.
On a deeper dive.
It was enjoyable, and again, I hope folks out there. It has been tough for a lot of us, depending on where you're at on different policies. But I really think things are going to get better, and me talking about it made me feel better. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great. We'll have you back in a year, and we'll do it.
Well, you got to come on the radio show first.
Well, love to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Kam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC. To tell us what you like to hear, what you've thought about the podcast so far, or even just to mention how awesome we are, we have a new email address and we'd love to hear from you.
That's right. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com. I know it's a mouthful, but it's podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com.